Captain Jake Martinez walked slowly across the bridge of the U.S. Defender. The ship was humanity's first real attempt at exploring deep space. It was not pretty to look at, but it worked. The metal hull was covered in patches and repairs from their long journey. Inside, 23 crew members lived and worked in cramped spaces that smelled like oil and recycled. Jake stopped next to the main screen and looked out at the stars. They had been traveling for 6 months now, mapping new systems and looking for signs of life. So far, they had found nothing but empty planets and dead rocks floating in space. Earth felt very far away. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat at the communications desk. She wore headphones and listened to the static that filled space between the stars. Her job was boring most days. She listened for signals from Earth, or from other human ships that might be lost. Today felt different, though. Something was wrong with the static. Amy pressed buttons on her control panel and adjusted the frequency. The sound changed. Instead of random noise, she heard something that made her heart beat faster. It was a pattern. The signal was weak and kept breaking up, but it was clearly made by someone intelligent. She turned around in her chair and called out to Jake. Her voice was excited, but also worried. Jake walked over to her station and put on a spare set of headphones. He listened for a few minutes, his face growing serious. The signal was not human. It was something else. Something alien. Jake called for Commander Lisa Brooks to come to the bridge. Lisa was the ship's science officer and the smartest person on board. She had studied languages and computer systems back on Earth. If anyone could figure out what the signal meant, it would be her. Lisa arrived quickly. She was a thin woman with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Jake explained what Amy had found, and Lisa listened to the signal herself. She recorded it and ran it through the ship's computer systems. Dr. Sam Carter joined them on the bridge. He was supposed to be sleeping, but the excitement in the crew's voices had woken him up. Sam was a xenolinguist, which meant he studied alien languages. Of course, no one had ever found any alien languages to study before. Until now, the 4 of them worked together for hours. The signal was complex. It had mathematical patterns that suggested intelligence, but it also had something else. Something that sounded desperate. Lisa finally spoke up. She had been quiet for a long time, working with the computer to break down the signal into smaller parts. What she had discovered made everyone on the bridge feel cold. It was a distress call. The signal came from somewhere far away, but not too far for their ship to reach. It was a cry for help, sent out into space by someone who was in terrible danger. The message was old, too. It had been traveling through space for weeks before Amy picked it up. Sam worked on translating the parts of the message that the computer could decode. What he found made the situation even more frightening. The aliens who sent the message called themselves the Kalari Federation. They were peaceful people who lived on 3 planets around a distant star, but something had attacked them. Something called the Vorthan Empire. The message talked about invasion and destruction. It mentioned ships that came from the darkness between stars and brought death to entire worlds. The Kalari were being wiped out, and they had sent this message as their last hope. Jake read the translated parts of the message out loud to his crew. The Kalari had been watching Earth for many years. They had seen human radio and television signals. They knew that humans were different from other species in space, that the aliens called humans Deathworlders. They said Earth was so dangerous that most alien species would die just from landing there. The air was too thick, the gravity too strong, the weather too violent. But humans had not just survived on this deadly planet. They had become the top predators. The Kalari message said that humans were the only species they knew of that might be able to fight the Vorthan Empire. They were asking for help from the most dangerous creatures they had ever discovered. Jake called Earth immediately. The signal would take days to reach home, and the answer would take days to come back. But Admiral Karain Hayes needed to know about this right away. The crew of the Defender spent those days studying everything they could about the signal. They learned that the Kalari Federation was made up of 3 different alien species who lived together in peace. They had never fought a war. They had no weapons designed to kill. They built beautiful cities and created art and music. The Vorthan Empire was the opposite. They were conquerors who moved from system to system, taking everything of value and leaving empty worlds behind them. They had technology that was far ahead of anything humans had built. Their ships were huge and powerful. Their weapons could destroy entire cities in seconds. When Admiral Hayes finally answered Jake's message, her words were simple and direct. Earth's government had decided to help. It did not matter that humanity was outgunned and outnumbered. It did not matter that they might all die trying to save aliens they had never met. The human race could not stand by and watch while an entire civilization was destroyed. Jake gathered his crew in the ship's main room. He told them about Earth's decision. He also told them that anyone who wanted to go home could do so. No one would think less of them for choosing safety over this dangerous mission. Not a single crew member chose to leave. Amy Foster spoke for all of them when she said that listening to that distress call had changed everything. They were not just explorers anymore. They were humanity's first contact with the galaxy, and they had learned that the galaxy needed protection. Jake ordered the ship to change course toward the Kalari system. The Defender was not a warship. It had only basic shields and small weapons for defense against space debris. But it was fast, and its crew was determined. As they prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Jake thought about what they were heading toward. The Kalari coordinates were 3 jumps away. According to their calculations, they would arrive just as the Vorthan Empire finished destroying the last Kalari world. Earth was also preparing. Every spaceship that could be modified for combat was being fitted with weapons. Every volunteer who could be trained was being given a crash course in space warfare. Humanity had never fought a real space battle before, but they were about to learn. The Defender entered hyperspace with a flash of blue light. Behind them, Earth's war machine was awakening. Ahead of them, an alien civilization waited for salvation. That might never come. Jake Martinez and his crew were about to become the first humans to fight for someone else's freedom among the stars. The used Defender dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kalari system. What Captain Jake Martinez saw on the main screen made his stomach turn. The beautiful triple star system that the Kalari had called home for thousands of years was now a battlefield. Massive ships hung in space like dark metal cities. They were so big that Jake had trouble understanding their size. Each Vorthan dreadnought was easily 10 times larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their black hulls reflected no light, making them look like holes cut out of space itself. Smaller ships moved between the giants like angry insects. They carried glowing cargo containers full of stolen resources back to the larger vessels. Jake could see the bright fires of cities burning on the planets below. The Kalari worlds were being stripped bare. Commander Lisa Brooks worked quickly at her station, scanning the system for any sign of Kalari survivors. The readings were not good. Most of the major cities showed no life signs. The Vorthan had been thorough in their destruction. Lieutenant Amy Foster kept the ship's communications quiet. They were hiding behind a large asteroid field, but the Vorthan sensors were much better than human technology. If they were discovered now, the mission would end before it began. Dr. Sam Carter studied the alien ships through the telescope. He had been learning about Vorthan technology from the Kalari messages they had decoded during the trip. What he saw matched the descriptions perfectly. The ships were built for intimidation as much as warfare. Every surface was covered in spikes and weapon ports. They were designed to cause fear. Jake made a decision that could save them or kill them all. He ordered Amy to send a coded message toward the third planet, Coloris Prime. The Kalari had mentioned hidden resistance groups in their distress call. If any of them were still alive, they might respond. They waited for 6 hours. Jake began to think that everyone was dead when Amy's equipment picked up a weak signal. It was coming from inside an asteroid near the planet. Someone was still alive. Down there, the signal led them to an abandoned mining station built into a large rock. The place had been empty for years, but now it showed signs of recent use. Jake took a small team in a shuttle to make contact. Lisa, Sam, and 2 Marines named Alex Turner and Nicole Wright went with him. The mining station was dark and cold. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridors as they followed the signal deeper into the rock. Jake carried a translation device that Sam had built using the Kalari language patterns they had decoded. They found the aliens in a large cavern that had once been used to store mining equipment. There were about 30 of them, and Jake's first sight of an alien species took his breath away. The Kalari were humanoid, but clearly not human. They were taller than most people, with thin bodies and long arms. Their skin was a pale blue color that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Their eyes were large and completely black, showing intelligence and sadness that needed no translation. One of the Kalari stepped forward. The translation device identified him as Elder Jean, one of the few government leaders who had escaped the initial attack. He spoke in a musical voice that sounded like wind chimes. The device translated his words. "You came. We did not believe anyone would hear our call." Jake removed his helmet so the alien could see his face. "We heard you. Earth heard you. We came. As fast as we could." Elder Jean studied Jake's features with those large black eyes. "You are the Deathworlders, the ones from the violent planet." It was not a question. "We prefer to call ourselves human," Jake replied. "But yes, we are from Earth." The elder gestured for them to sit. The Kalari had created a small living area in the cavern with simple furniture made from mining equipment. As they talked, Jake learned the full extent of the disaster. The Vorthan Empire had arrived 6 months ago with a fleet of over 200 ships. They had demanded complete surrender within 1 day. When the Kalari had tried to negotiate, the Vorthan had destroyed the capital city of each planet as a demonstration. The Kalari had no military. They had never needed one. Their 3 species had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. They had tried to defend themselves with mining equipment and civilian ships, but it had been hopeless. Elder Jean explained that the Vorthan were not just conquerors. They were scavengers who moved from system to system, taking everything of value. They strip-mined planets for resources and took the survivors as slaves. When they were finished, they moved on to find new victims. "How many systems have they destroyed?" Lisa asked. "Hundreds," Jean replied. "They have been doing this for over 1,000 years. No one has ever stopped them." Jake felt anger building in his chest. Why hasn't anyone fought back? Jean looked, confused by the question. How can anyone fight them? Their ships are too powerful. Their weapons are too advanced. Fighting them would be suicide. Sam leaned forward. "Tell us about their ships. How do they work? What are their weak points?" The Kalari shared everything they knew about Vorthan technology. The enemy ships were powered by exotic matter reactors that made them incredibly fast and powerful. Their weapons could punch through any known defense. Their shields could absorb massive amounts of energy. But as Jake listened, he began to notice something interesting. The Vorthan tactics were simple. They relied on overwhelming force and superior technology. They had never faced an enemy that fought with creativity or desperation. Lieutenant Amy Foster had been monitoring Vorthan communications from the shuttle. She came down to report that the enemy was preparing for their final assault on the remaining Kalari cities. They had 3 days at most before the last survivors were wiped out. Jake made contact with the Defender and then with Earth. Admiral. Hayes had been busy. Humanity's entire space fleet was being converted for war. Every ship that could mount a weapon was being prepared for battle. The first wave of human reinforcements would arrive in 2 days. Elder Jean could not believe what he was hearing. Your species is coming here to fight for us? But you barely know us. Why would you risk everything for strangers? Jake stood up and looked the alien leader in the eye. Because that's what humans do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. It doesn't matter if you're human or alien. Wrong is wrong, and we can't let this happen. The Kalari were amazed by human determination, but they were also terrified. They had seen what Vorthan weapons could do. They could not understand how primitive human ships could survive against such overwhelming force. Jake explained that humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy had been designed to fight the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, other humans. The Vorthan might have better technology, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to give up. Amy set up a communication link between the mining station and the Defender. Jake began coordinating with the other Kalari resistance groups scattered across the system. There were not many left, but they were eager to help. Jake taught them basic guerrilla tactics that humans had used in countless wars. The Kalari were horrified by some of the methods, but they began to understand that surviving against the Vorthan would require them to think like their human allies. As night fell on the mining station, Jake looked out at the stars through a crack in the rock. Somewhere out there, human ships were racing toward this system. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were coming anyway. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone threatened people under human protection. The first human warship arrived like thunder from empty space. The U's Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace with its weapons already charging and its crew ready for battle. Captain Jake Martinez watched from the Defender as humanity's newest creation took position near the asteroid field. The Vengeance was not pretty. It had been built in 72 hours using parts from 3 different space stations and 2 cargo ships. Welding marks covered its hull, and some sections still showed the logos of civilian companies. But it carried enough firepower to level a small city, and its crew of volunteers knew they might never see Earth again. Colonel Ryan Peterson commanded the advance fleet. 11 more ships followed the Vengeance out of hyperspace over the next few hours. Each one was different. Some had been cargo haulers before the war. Others had been research vessels or mining ships. All of them now bristled with weapons that human engineers had designed in desperate haste. Jake met with Peterson on the Vengeance. The colonel was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth and knew what real combat looked like. He studied the tactical displays showing Vorthan positions throughout the system. "This is going to be ugly," Peterson said quietly. "We're outnumbered 20 to 1, and their ships are bigger than anything we've ever seen." Jake nodded. "But they've never fought humans before. That has to count for something." Dr. Helen Grant had arrived with the fleet. She was Earth's leading expert on alien biology, though until now that had been mostly theoretical. She worked with Elder Jean to study captured Vorthan equipment and learn about their physiology. What she discovered was encouraging. The Vorthan were physically weak compared to humans. They had evolved on a low-gravity world with a thin atmosphere. Their bones were fragile, and they could not handle stress the way humans could. More importantly, their psychology was built around the assumption that superior technology always won battles. The Vorthan had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced serious resistance. Every species they encountered either surrendered immediately or was destroyed so quickly that they never learned to adapt. They had no experience with enemies who refused to give up. Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres commanded the converted research ship U.E. Pioneer. He had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in the fleet. His job was to test Vorthan defenses and learn how their ships responded to attack. Torres took the Pioneer close to a Vorthan patrol group near the second planet. The enemy ships detected him immediately and moved to intercept. They were fast and powerful, just as the Kalari had described. Their weapons could have vaporized the Pioneer in seconds, but Torres did something that no Vorthan commander had ever seen before. Instead of running or trying to fight at long range, he flew straight at the largest enemy ship. The Vorthan fired everything they had, but Torres used the Pioneer's small size and human reflexes to dodge between the energy beam's dot at the last second. Torres ordered his crew to evacuate in escape pods. Then he rammed the Pioneer directly into the Vorthan ship's engine section. The impact sent both vessels spinning out of control. The Vorthan ship's reactor overloaded and exploded, taking 2 nearby ships with it. The explosion was visible from every Vorthan position in the system. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they had encountered an enemy who was willing to die to hurt them. The psychological effect was immediate. Vorthan commanders began requesting additional ships and more careful patrol patterns. Captain Jake Martinez worked with the Kalari resistance groups to coordinate attacks on Vorthan ground forces. The aliens were terrified of human combat methods, but they were desperate enough to try anything. Jake taught them how to build bombs from mining explosives. He showed them how to use their knowledge of local terrain to set up ambushes. Most importantly, he taught them that the goal was not to win fair fights, but to make the enemy afraid. The Kalari had underground tunnel systems that connected their cities. The Vorthan knew about them, but considered them unimportant. They could not imagine that civilized beings would use such passages for warfare. Jake proved them wrong. Working with a Kalari engineer named Kess, he organized teams that used the tunnels to attack Vorthan supply depots and communication centers. The aliens learned to move like ghosts through their own cities, striking without warning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The effect on Vorthan morale was devastating. They had expected to finish their conquest quickly and move on to the next target. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Commander Lisa Brooks analyzed captured Vorthan communication signals. She discovered that the enemy was sending increasingly worried reports back to their home fleet. They had never encountered resistance like this before, and they were requesting reinforcements. But the human fleet was also preparing for something bigger. Admiral Karen Hayes had arrived with the main battle group. 18 warships and 40 support vessels filled with 50,000 human soldiers, marines, and pilots. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Admiral Hayes met with Jake and Colonel Peterson to plan the final assault. The Vorthan were preparing to destroy the last Kalari cities in 3 days. The human fleet had to attack before then, or there would be no one left to save. The plan was simple and completely insane. The human ships would attack the main Vorthan fleet in orbit around Kelleris Prime. They would punch through the enemy formation and force a direct battle. While the space fight was happening, human marines would board Vorthan ships and attack them from the inside. Dr. Sam Carter had been studying Vorthan ship designs. He discovered that the aliens built their vessels for intimidation rather than efficiency. The massive ships had weak points that smaller, more agile human vessels could exploit. The boarding teams trained in mock-ups built from cargo containers. They practiced fighting in low-gravity and hostile atmospheres. Most importantly, they learned to use weapons that fired solid bullets instead of energy beams. The Vorthen had shields designed to stop energy weapons, but they had no defense against. Old-fashioned projectiles moving at high speed. Major Chris Johnson led the Marine assault teams. He was a veteran of urban combat on Earth and understood how to fight in confined spaces. His soldiers carried weapons that would have been familiar to warriors from centuries ago: rifles, grenades, and knives. The Vorthen had energy weapons that could cut through armor, but they had never learned to fight in close quarters. Their tactics assumed they would always have technological superiority and room to maneuver. As the human fleet prepared for battle, Jake visited Elder Jean one last time. The Kalari leader could not understand how humans were willing to risk everything for strangers they had just met. "Your people are going to die for us," Jean said. "Many of them will never see their home again. Why do you do this?" Jake thought about all the human ships that were about to enter battle. He thought about the volunteers who had signed up knowing they might not survive. He thought about Earth, far away and safe, and the people there who had decided that justice was more important than safety. "Because someone has to," he said finally. "The galaxy has bullies, and bullies only understand one thing. Someone has to be willing to stand up to them." The human fleet moved into attack formation. In a few hours, the Vorthen Empire would learn what happened when they threatened people under human protection. The galaxy was about to change forever. The human fleet struck like lightning from the darkness of space. Admiral Karen Haas led 18 warships in a direct assault on the Vorthen formation around Talaris Prime. The enemy had expected the humans to attack carefully, using long-range weapons and defensive tactics. Instead, the human ships charged straight into the heart of the alien fleet. The U.S. Vengeance opened fire first. Its weapons were crude compared to Vorthen technology, but they fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The enemy shields, designed to stop energy beams, could not handle the kinetic impact of physical objects. Holes appeared in the hull of the nearest Vorthen ship as the metal slugs punched clean through. Captain Jake Martinez watched the battle from the bridge of the Defender. His ship was too small to join the main attack, but he had his own mission. Working with Commander Lisa Brooks, he coordinated the Kalari resistance fighters on the ground. Below. The battle in space was chaos. Vorthen ships were bigger and more powerful, but the human vessels moved like angry wasps around sleeping giants. They darted between the massive alien dreadnoughts, firing at close range and then disappearing before the enemy could respond. Colonel Ryan Peterson led a squadron of converted cargo ships against the Vorthen supply vessels. These ships were not as heavily armed as the main warships, but they carried the equipment needed to strip mine the Kalari planets. Peterson's attack destroyed 3 supply ships in the first 10 minutes of battle. The Vorthen commanders were confused. They had never fought an enemy that attacked this way. Their ships were designed for battles where both sides lined up and exchanged fire at long range. The humans refused to fight that kind of battle. Commander Lisa Brooks had found something important in the Vorthen communication networks. She had been listening to their military frequencies and discovered that the enemy commanders were panicking. They kept asking their home fleet for instructions on how to fight humans. Major Chris Johnson led the first boarding action against a Vorthen cruiser. His Marines used small assault shuttles to attach themselves to the enemy ship's hull. Then, they cut through the metal with plasma torches and invaded the vessel from the outside. Outside, the Vorthen crew had never experienced anything like it. Their ship's internal defenses were designed to stop energy weapons and gas attacks. They had no idea how to fight enemies who used bullets and grenades in the corridors of their own ship. Johnson's Marines moved through the Vorthen ship like a force of nature. Their weapons fired solid bullets that could punch through alien armor. Their tactics were based on hundreds of years of human military experience. Most importantly, they fought with a ferocity that the Vorthen had never encountered. The aliens tried to fight back, but their energy weapons were designed for use in open space, not in the narrow hallways of a ship. When a human marine rushed at them with a knife, many Vorthan soldiers simply froze in terror. Johnson reached the ship's bridge in less than 20 minutes. The Vorthan captain tried to surrender, but Johnson had orders to capture the ship intact. His team took control of the vessel and turned its weapons against the other Vorthan ships. Dr. Helen Grant monitored the battle from the medical bay of the Vengeance. She was treating wounded humans, but she was also studying Vorthan prisoners. What she discovered confirmed her theories about alien psychology. The Vorthan were not cowards, but they had never learned to handle stress the way humans did. When their carefully planned attacks failed, they became confused and frightened. They had no experience with enemies who adapted quickly to changing situations. Admiral Hayes pressed the attack against the Vorthan flagship. It was a massive vessel, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Its weapons could have destroyed the entire human fleet if used properly. But the Vorthan admiral inside was making mistakes. The alien commander kept trying to use traditional battle tactics against an enemy that ignored all the rules. He positioned his ships for long-range combat while the humans fought at point-blank range. He tried to maintain formation while the human ships scattered like hunting wolves. Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres, who had survived his ramming attack in an escape pod, now commanded a captured Vorthan patrol ship. He used his knowledge of their technology to lead other human ships through the enemy formation. The Vorthan could not tell their own vessels from the captured ones until it was too late. Captain Jake Martinez received reports from Kalari resistance fighters across all 3 planets. The human tactics were working. Vorthan ground forces were abandoning their positions and retreating to their landing sites. Some were even trying to return to their ships early. The turning point came when Admiral Hayes led a desperate assault on the Vorthan flagship. She used nuclear mines and kinetic impactors to break through the enemy's defensive screen. The human ships took heavy damage, but they reached their target. Hayes herself led a boarding team onto the alien flagship. They fought their way through corridors filled with advanced technology that humans could barely understand. But technology meant nothing when the people using it had never learned to fight with their backs against the wall. The Vorthan Supreme Commander was waiting in the ship's command center. He was a tall alien with silver skin and cold eyes that showed both intelligence and fear. When Admiral Hayes entered with her weapon drawn, he immediately tried to negotiate. "You cannot win," the alien commander said through a translation device. "Our empire spans 1,000 worlds. Even if you defeat this fleet, more will come." Admiral Hayes looked around the command center. The walls were covered with displays showing Vorthan conquests throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds had fallen. To these ships, billions of beings had died or been enslaved. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but they'll know what they're facing when they get here." She showed the alien commander footage from the battle. Human ships, some held together with emergency patches and determination, had carved through the Vorthan fleet like it was made of paper. Marines with primitive weapons had captured ships that were supposed to be invincible. "Your empire has never fought humans before," Hayes continued. "You've spent 1,000 years conquering peaceful species who didn't know how to fight. We learned to fight by killing each other for thousands of years. Every weapon we carry, every tactic we use, was designed to kill the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, other humans." The Vorthan commander studied the battle footage. He could see his own ships being destroyed or captured by an enemy that should have been helpless against superior technology. For the first time in his life, he felt something that no Vorthan had experienced in centuries of conquest. Fear. The surrender came 6 hours after the battle began. The surviving Vorthan ships agreed to leave Kalari space immediately and never return. But the real change had already begun. News of the human victory spread throughout the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Species that had lived in fear of the Vorthen for centuries suddenly learned that there was something in the universe even more dangerous than their oppressors. Elder Jean spoke to the reformed Galactic Council 3 months later. Representatives from dozens of species had come to hear about the humans who had defeated the Vorthen Empire. We called them Deathworlders because their planet was hostile, Jean said. We never realized we were summoning our salvation. These humans fight not because they enjoy war, but because they cannot tolerate injustice. The Kalari Federation was rebuilt stronger than before. Human engineers helped design new cities that could defend themselves. Human teachers showed the Kalari how to build weapons and train soldiers, not for conquest, but for protection. Captain Jake Martinez was promoted to admiral and given command of humanity's newest ship, the U's Guardian. It was the first vessel designed specifically to respond to distress calls from anywhere in the galaxy. Standing on the bridge of his new ship, Jake looked out at the stars and thought about how much had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had found their place as the protectors of species who could not protect themselves. The galaxy had learned a new rule. Civilizations under human protection were not to be touched. The Deathworlders had heard the SOS, and they would always answer the call for help, because that was what humans did. They protected those who needed protection, even if it meant traveling across the galaxy to do it.